Hello YouTube, it's Mason, and I am back with another video today. Today I'm going to be replacing the thermal paste on my MacBook A1181. It is a mid-2009 model with an Intel Core 2 Duo processor, and basically what's happening right now is my computer seems to be running pretty hot. Now that is normal for MacBooks to run hot, but I was noticing my temperatures getting up into the 60s and 70s, and my cooling fan was always spooling up and getting really loud. And so I decided to, replace the thermal paste. Of course, after a lot of research of, trying to figure out what could be making my laptop get so hot, it finally occurred to me like, hey, maybe the thermal paste is actually worn out. So, you know, after finally coming to that conclusion, I decided, maybe it's time to get into that laptop and replace the thermal paste. Now that does make me nervous, as I'm not a huge fan of taking things apart, especially things I haven't really worked on before. But after doing a lot of research and figuring out kind of, what it's like and what goes into it, and just how it's done, I feel fairly confident that I can actually, get into this and, get it started. And I've watched enough videos, done enough research that I think I know what I'm doing. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace the thermal paste on my laptop. I ordered a tube of Arctic Silver 5 thermal compound, which is some of the best compound you can get for your computer. And I'm going to be replacing the old thermal paste on that laptop with this Arctic 5 Silver. And we're going to find out if it actually makes the laptop run cooler, if the cooling fan will, stay quiet and not spool up all the time, and if we'll see better temps throughout. And then I'll show you guys some videos afterwards of how the laptop performs and, see if it works. But without further ado, let's get into it. Alright guys, so here we have my mid-2009 MacBook A1181. I wanted to do a quick video so we could actually see here what's going on inside this laptop. So here's the main chip. This is the Intel Core 2 Duo processor. This is pretty much the brains of the entire laptop. If we move over here, we see the NVIDIA integrated graphics. And I'm not sure the actual model or name of this NVIDIA chip, but it's I want to say it's part of their G series. The 2 sticks of 2GB RAM. Surprisingly, this laptop has a 7200 RPM drive in it, which I thought this thing was going to be a 5400 RPM drive, but nonetheless, this is actually a hard drive with a 7200 RPM speed, so that is actually quite nice. The laptop's pretty snappy with this drive, so that's not bad. And this gigantic mass here is actually the super drive, so that's pretty cool. And there is evidence in here that this laptop has been taken apart before. Somebody has serviced it inside at least once before. But for the most part, everything in here looks to be in really good shape. It looks to be intact. So it looks good. This is probably the little speaker that does the infamous Mac chime when you boot up your MacBook. The dong, that sound. And then back here we have the 2 rear firing speakers. But even the cooling fan bay looks really clean, and I went through everything with a little toothbrush and kind of fine cleaned it. But I mean, everything actually looks pretty good in here. The internals all look like they're in pretty good shape. I used a little bit of hydrogen peroxide as my cleaning alcohol to kind of clean off these chips, and I got all that old crusty thermal paste off. What I actually found is that the thermal paste was thin, if not non-existent. There was hardly any of it there on top of these chrome surfaces here. So that is good enough reason to believe like why the MacBook was getting so hot all the time, because there was like no thermal paste contacting these plates or this cooler. And this is actually the cooler for the GPU and the processor right here. I've used the same alcohol to clean off these surfaces as well. It's a copper cooling and all that, so pretty standard stuff for a MacBook of this age and time period. But everything looks pretty good. And if we move over here, we'll see the Arctic 5 or Arctic Silver 5 thermal compound. This is probably the best stuff you can get for any computer. It's like top-notch thermal compound, so this is, again, really good stuff. And then here, judging by this silver kind of foil-looking tape, I have good enough reason to believe this is the original cooler or cooling fan for the laptop. Again, it looks like it's in really good shape. It wasn't too dirty when I pulled it out. Looked really clean. So that's really good. And then we have this battery. This is not a standard Apple battery. This is third party. So the battery on the MacBook was replaced to a third party battery. And the battery is shot, but it's all I've got for now, so I'll work with it. And then if we come over here, and I'm sorry for the messy bed, we have the actual keyboard cover, which I took off to expose all the internals. Everything here looks to be pretty good, actually. It looks like it's all here. It's all intact. It's clean. Keyboard looks great. So, yeah, this is my project here, replacing the thermal compound. Hopefully, in the end here, I will see cooler temperatures. Hopefully that cooling fan won't spool up so much, and this thing will run colder and quieter, and should be good to go. So after this, I will be applying the thermal compound and remating the cooler to these chips, and then I'll start throwing this guy back together and see if she lives. Alright, so this is just a quick follow-up here. I have the MacBook plugged in and turned on. And after I've replaced the thermal paste and buttoned her all back up, the MacBook has successfully turned on. It made its infamous MacBook chime when it boots right up. And it is currently loading into the operating system right now. So far everything looks pretty good actually. I did do an initial test run after I put the cooler back on. Before I buttoned her up, I just slapped the power cord in and turned her on just to make sure she would boot up and run, and the MacBook booted right up. I was able to log into the operating system. And I checked my temperatures from Hardware Monitor, and it showed that the processor was idling in the 40s and 50s. It did almost get up to 60, but then it went back down and it just stabilized idling at about 45 to 46 degrees Celsius, and it just sat there for a good almost 10 minutes. So I think it is pretty safe to say that the MacBook is working and that my job replacing the thermal compound was successful. As you can see here, we have successfully booted up into macOS El Capitan. And it's quiet. The cooling fan isn't making any kind of noises or anything right now, so that's really good. The MacBook is still loading at the moment. It's still going through its initial processes, booting up applications in the background, kind of loading all of its core stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and open up Hardware Monitor real quick you'll see an icon shows up for hardware monitor here on the taskbar at the top. And when I click open to it, you can see the Mac is running actually fairly warm. It has spiked up to about 64 degrees. So this is the second run of the MacBook now. And these were not the temperatures I was getting the first time, but let's see if real quickly these temperatures will stabilize and go back down. Now, anywhere in the 60s is still okay. That's a little bit high for it to idle, but 60 is actually not in the danger zone. If we go up to 70 or 80, that's when I'm going to start getting concerned. But right now the chip seems to be hovering right about 67, 68. The cooling fan, as you can see, is idling at about 2002 RPMs. But it doesn't appear to be really doing much else right now. You see some applications, it looks like, are still trying to open up in the background. And now the processor is dropping back down. So let's see if it goes back down. It's staying at about 60. And now we're back into the 50s. But so it looks like it's slowly starting to drop back down. I will do another video later on just to see how the MacBook performs when I put it under a load. Maybe I'll open up YouTube and see how it does there, but I'm still kind of breaking in the thermal paste and just, letting it kind of set and cure and all that. So I'm mainly just kind of running the Mac lightly right now while the thermal paste sets, but I will kind of, throw a little bit of pressure onto the MacBook here in a moment in my next video and see how it does. But now, as it's, idling, you can see the temperatures are slowly dropping back down. So I think it's normal when thermal paste is fresh and new. It's just applied that the chip will get a little hot as the paste is, setting and curing to its surfaces. But I think after the MacBook is run a little bit, the processor should, start running a little bit cooler as everything kind of sets in. But right now these idling temps are a little high, but for the most part they're not bad. This is still, this is okay. This is definitely okay. And I mean, for the most part the MacBook is running. That's the biggest thing, right? Like, we're booted into the operating system and the MacBook is running. The processor doesn't seem to want to drop back down into the 40s right now, but we'll see in a later video what happens if it goes down. It looks like it is slowly dropping, but again, I replaced the thermal compound on this guy with Arctic Silver 5 thermal compound, so this should run a lot better with this thermal compound, as I do believe it is better thermal compound than even what Apple threw on the MacBook in the factory. So other than that, the MacBook appears to be working just fine. So I'll let you know what happens here soon. Alright guys, so now it is the morning after. I completed the thermal paste job yesterday. I did an initial run of the MacBook after I finished with the thermal paste job. Before I finished buttoning her all up, putting all the screws back in, I just kind of plugged in the power adapter for the Mac, and when I initially turned it on, what I saw was actually pretty good. I noticed that the temps seemed to be lower, it was idling in the 40s, and it actually booted up into Mac OS El Capitan with no trouble at all. After I finished buttoning the laptop back up and I threw the battery back in, put the case back on the laptop and everything, I booted it up again, and I noticed that the temps were much higher. They were idling in the 60s, so I went online and I did some research, and I found out that it's actually quite normal for Macs to run a little bit hotter, especially in the 60s and 50s. That's actually totally normal for these things. So I figured, it looks like everything actually is fine. So as you can see here, I've got the MacBook plugged in right now. It is charging. The MacBook is using a aftermarket third-party battery. It's not the stock battery that this machine would have came with from Apple. So the battery, I do believe, is worn out because the laptop doesn't hold a charge for much longer than maybe an hour or less. But right now it is plugged in and charging, and I will show you guys now how the MacBook does after kind of sitting overnight and just kind of fire it up from cold and see how it does. I did use it last night after I took the video, after I buttoned it up, and I used some websites. I put some YouTube on and kind of pushed the processor a little bit, and the Mac definitely got kind of warm. It spiked up to 70, but it didn't break 80, and it stayed in the 70s until it started cooling back down. The cooling fan definitely spooled up to over 6,000 RPMs, but the MacBook never broke 80, and it finally kind of stabilized and started hovering in the 50s, which I think is totally fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and open it up and let's see how the MacBook does. I'll actually load some websites here and just kind of push the machine a little bit and see how the processor does. So, of course, yesterday, as I showed you, the MacBook is using a 7200 RPM drive. So as we can see here, after opening it, it immediately opens up to the lock screen without hesitation, which is really nice. And if we come up here to the top, we can see that we are at 68% with the battery charge. We're already connected to our Wi-Fi, and our time is 8:08 in the morning. So I will go ahead and put in this password here. And we are greeted with what I was actually doing last night. I'm sorry. I was listening to a little music there, but actually it just launched right back into iTunes, which is the application that I had running last night before I went to bed. So we'll just go ahead and close that out for now. And if you know Macs, you know that when you open an application, it stays open. And that you can tell by the little dot down there at the bottom. MacBooks will actually keep the applications open in the background. And I believe they do that to allow the laptop to run faster, because you don't have to worry about relaunching it, it just kind of stays open in the background. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and open up Hardware Monitor, and as you can see right now, this is how the laptop is doing on a cold start. It's idling at 42 degrees Celsius right now, and the cooling fan is just barely running. At about 2000 RPMs, it's just fluctuating there, but that's it. So, because this is the older MacBook A1181 model, the hardware monitor is pretty much using, whatever sensors are available on this motherboard to get all of its data. The processor is actually an Intel Core 2 Duo, so it's a dual core. And right now, hardware monitor is only detecting one core from the processor, but I've always just kind of used the one core to, kind of get the temperature that the processor is actually running at entirely. So we get our drive information for the hard drive, which the hard drive is running extremely cold, which is good. 23 degrees Celsius is great. And right now our temperature is fluctuating anywhere from 43 to 41 degrees Celsius, which is really good. And right now you can't even hear the cooling fan at all. Like, this thing is just completely quiet. Now with Mac computers, hardware monitor is a little bit different from a Windows computer. With Windows, you actually get an actual window, and it will actually show all of your information like it does here, but it'll be in an actual window instead of a pop-out. And then of course I can click on specific things here, and it'll expand these kind of menus here, which show even more information on, just what's going on specifically with that device. And it's actually pretty cool. But if I go up to the top here and I click right here on this graph, it brings up what is called history graphs, which is something that with Windows PCs, you don't get this little window. But basically, it's all the same information. We have our CPU core 1, heat pipe 1, CPU proximity, north bridge die, north bridge proximity, heat pipe 2. We have our hard drive, and then we have our cooling fan, our voltages and currents, and power consumption. And then over here to the left, we have active graphs, which are showing exactly what is happening real time with everything on the motherboard and, with all the internal hardware. And these lines may look a little complex, like, whoa, like, what's all this saying? But really, it's just kind of showing real time what is going on right now with the hardware. And you can see over here where I've got the arrow, our RPM, and this is pretty much where the fan was spinning the fastest here, and then where it was spinning at the lowest, and in between is where it's currently spinning. So, our fan can kind of fluctuate in between those two. And then up here we have our processor temperature, which these different colors here represent all of these different, different things here, with our blue line being the actual CPU Core 1 temperature. And right now, up top, we have 46 degrees Celsius and 0 degrees Celsius. So with this being the highest temp that the processor has reached today since I've opened this program, we're idling very nicely right now. So go ahead and close that out. And I'm going to go ahead and open up Safari. and Safari just opens right up. It opens up to the last page I was on. But I'm going to go ahead and navigate to Google's website, and it takes a few seconds, but this laptop definitely gets there. And you can see everything seems to be working fine. I'll go ahead and open up YouTube. Now, YouTube is a fairly intensive website. I'm going to go ahead and go to my channel. And I'm going to go ahead and load one of my videos here. And I'm going to go ahead and load this video. So we'll be able to hear the sound. And while that's loading, I'm going to go ahead and open up Hardware Monitor. And let's watch the processor. So as you can see right now, while the video plays, the laptop is just running at low 50s right now. So that's not bad actually. Running YouTube, doing all that sort of stuff, especially if you're going to be social networking, it's important that your device can handle it. And after replacing the thermal paste, I'd say this is a pretty good sign that I did a good job. Because you can see that while running, a fairly intensive website that is pushing the GPU and the CPU, our temperatures are actually staying in a very nice place. And our cooling fan, of course, isn't even spooling up at all, so this is really good. Mainly because before I did the CPU thermal paste replacement, before I went and replaced the thermal paste yesterday, when I would use this laptop, if I would go on the websites like this, or Facebook, or Netflix, or anything, the CPU would get up to 60, sometimes 70 degrees Celsius, and the cooling fan would just spool up to 6,000 RPMs. But now that I'm using websites like this, and I'm actually, watching these videos, and, I'm actually using the computer for fairly intensive things, the processor is staying pretty cold. And the cooling fan especially isn't spooling up anymore. So I'd say my job was pretty successful. So I'll go ahead and pause that, and I'll go ahead and, close out of Safari, and basically, yeah, that is really it. I mean, I can show you guys opening applications, but it's a 7200 RPM drive, so that's obviously, pretty slow. If I were to open programs like Office or, Word or PowerPoint, like those do take a few minutes to open up just because they're fairly big programs. So I won't do any of that, but for the most part, this video was just to kind of show you guys how the laptop is performing after the thermal paste job. And so far, it looks like it's actually running very well. If I reopen this and I go to, let's say, Netflix, let's see. We'll just hit play here on Coco. It's actually telling me I need to install Silverlight. So I just went ahead and clicked use every time. I do plan to use this laptop still. It is my daily driver, so I will want all these things set up. But Netflix uses Microsoft Silverlight on some web browsers to actually work, so right now Coco's loading, and I'm not going to full screen the video, but this is just using Netflix right now. And with Netflix, you can see the processor has again gone up to 66 degrees Celsius versus the 50, but because now we're actually using our GPU, and now we're up to 66, 67, but again, cooling fan isn't really spooling up at all. So I mean, you know, this all looks pretty good. So yeah, if you guys are looking to do a thermal paste replacement on an old MacBook A1181 from, well, mine is from mid-2009, but these span from the year of 2006 up to mid-2009. It's fairly easy to do the replacement. There's actually a lot of screws involved in order to disassemble this and get inside of it. There's screws everywhere, so you're gonna have 2 screws over here, and I'll actually show you them. They're right there. You're gonna have a screw here, you're gonna have a screw there, and then if you go to this side, you're gonna have a screw there and a screw there. You're gonna have 2 more screws on the back by the speaker. Let me show you those. You're gonna have a screw there and a screw there, and then a screw there and a screw there. And then if you go to the bottom, you can see through my case, I'm sorry, you're gonna have a screw there, a screw there, screw there, and then the rest of them are actually gonna be behind the battery. So just twist that to the unlock, and then your battery will pop out. And I'm not gonna show you because like I'm already done. But when you pull that battery out, the rest of the screws are gonna be in there. And you'll want to take all those out, and then your keyboard will lift up, and just gently pull it, because you are dealing with polycarbonate plastic, which is fairly brittle. So just gently pull up, and then there will be 1 ribbon cable attached that basically connects the entire keyboard and everything, and you'll just disconnect that and you'll see inside. But if you're looking to do this replacement yourself for the thermal compounding, it's actually fairly easy. It's not too hard to do. Just make sure you apply the right amount on top of your chips, and then just don't touch it with your fingers. Just remate the cooler to the chips and screw everything in, and you should be good to go. I mean, you see here where I'm running temperature wise, and these are actually good temps. They're actually about right where they should be for a Mac. That's where they like to run, and this is actually totally fine. The computer is completely warmed up now, and it's actually doing very well. So I would have to say, if you do your thermal paste replacement and your temperatures are running about where mine are right now, like this, then you're totally fine. I would say, based on my experience, your job was very successful if you're seeing temperatures like this. So other than that, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, you liked what you saw, definitely subscribe to my channel for more content like this, or videos on cars, or me doing covers of songs. Like, if you're into that kind of stuff, then give my channel, this video definitely a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell if you want to see notifications on more stuff that I'm doing. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.